So the ORCA office has asked me to give this presentation, presumably because I have a lot of experience with grant proposals, both writing them and reviewing them. Can you all hear me in the back okay? Am I loud enough? All right, thanks. So I'm going to talk to you today as a person who writes these, but also, more importantly, as a person who has reviewed a lot of grant proposals from undergraduates submitted to the ORCA program. Okay? I'm going to give you some hints on how to write a competitive grant proposal. So the grant is $1,500. You get that money and you do what you need to do with it. Okay? So that can be spent on supplies, it can be spent on travel, it can be spent on pizza or Jamba Juice, whatever it is that you need to do to get your project done. And that will vary across disciplines and that sort of stuff. We can talk more about that in a little bit. In the past, about a third to 50% have been successful, and that's across all disciplines. Okay, so it doesn't matter what discipline you're in. The ORCA's office tries to fund those at about a third of all applications. Yeah, question.
So successful means success in getting the grant.
Success in getting the coin. That means you're successful. If you land $1,500, you're successful, right? So some disciplines have a lot more grant proposals submitted than others, but it doesn't matter, right? So those that have more submitted will have more successfully funded. Okay? And you can use that for all this sort of stuff. In my lab, my students, I support their travel and their reagents and their chemicals and their materials and supplies, and so they take that $1,500 and they buy pizza with it. Essentially, you buy out your time so that you don't have to work a part-time job to work in the lab, or sort of like that. Right? So that's how it usually works. Okay? But the experience should culminate in a research publication. That is the goal. Right? So all of the research that you do, turns out, does not exist until it's published. Okay? So all of your hard work will be for naught if there is not a published product that comes from it, either in terms of a peer-reviewed publication or a reviewed abstract or a reviewed conference proceedings or something like that. That's the goal that you try and shoot for. But essentially, the goal of this program is to take your education to the next level and to go from a consumer of knowledge to a generator of knowledge. Huh? Huh? That's awesome. That's awesome. You will be generating knowledge when you through this program, right? That's the coolest thing, right? So the next step, you're going to develop some skills. You're going to join other scholars in your discipline who are at the forefront of their discipline, and you will start creating knowledge just like your mentor does, right? So that's the goal, to become active, creative contributor to the world's repository of knowledge, right? So before I say anything more, first of all, don't be intimidated. I have a question for you. True or false? Students younger, dumber, and less prepared than you have gotten ORCA grants and completed great projects. We think, true or false? Yeah, true. I know that because I've mentored some of them, okay? Yeah, it's true. So don't be intimidated. All of you have what it takes to successfully write a grant proposal and have it funded, and to complete your project. You have it in you to do that. So our goal here today is to help you get over that energy of activation problem and successfully do this. Okay? So the first thing you need to know is what the program is. So coming here, you've already solved that problem. We're going to tell you what the program is today. Well, you can go to orca.byu.edu. There's a frequently asked questions section there. They have sample proposals that you can look at. They've got some advice from former students. All that sort of stuff is on that webpage. Oh, and I'm going to add that all the stuff that you see on the screen today, you can download from the ORCA website, right? So you don't have to take like copious notes or photograph the screen, right? You can download all this stuff later on. But you're going to want to read all those instructions carefully and do it. Now, the next step is to find someone who will serve as your mentor. Okay? This is extremely important. Okay? Maybe even more important than your project or your idea. You got to get a good mentor. And your goal in negotiating this is you need to convince this mentor that you are a good investment, because your mentor is juggling their research program, their teaching responsibilities, their family responsibilities. They're juggling all that sort of stuff, and it's really hard, not easy. And what you want to do is convince them that you are a good investment, because mentors like me are going to invest a lot of time in you. We're going to spend time helping you with your project. We're going to invest a lot of money in you. We're going to invest our own research dollars into your project. Okay? Huge investment. And we want a return on our investment as a mentor. So you need to convince them that you have what it takes to make good on this investment. Okay? So we're going to talk about this a little bit. So that means that you're going to know what's going on in that lab, or know the research program of your potential mentor before you even go see them. Okay? So look them up, check them out, Google them, right? Look at their webpage at BYU. Find out what their academic interests are. Maybe even read a few of their papers that they've published. Okay? But more important than this, you're going to want to find out what they're doing now. Because the papers that I publish, even the ones that came out this year, is work that I did 2 and 3 years ago or longer, right? So the stuff I'm doing right now is not on the website. So if you want to find out what I'm doing now, you need to talk to my students or go to the lab, right? And then you'll find out the straight dope. You'll know what's really going on in my lab, right? And they'll also tell you, oh yeah, you don't want to work with that guy, he's a big jerk, right? Or the equivalent, okay? So you want to find out who's in that lab and meet with them. Okay? Then come prepared with some questions. So when you do come to talk to them, know enough about their program that you've got some questions and things to talk about. Important, really important, is to be enthusiastic and passionate about your project. I often have students that come and want to work in my lab, but they'll say, oh, I haven't had a molecular biology class, or I didn't take Chem 351, or I didn't take advanced writing. I'm not sure if I'm qualified. Dude, you know what qualifies? Passion and enthusiasm, right? I don't care if you're a trombone player. I can teach a chimpanzee to do the polymerase chain reaction, right? But what I cannot teach is enthusiasm and passion. So if you have that, if you roll into that dude's office with some enthusiasm and some passion, then the rest will take care of itself, okay? So you want to have that, okay? You want to do some outside research on the topic, know, right, a little bit about the background on this, and then at some point, your mentor is going to have to write a letter of recommendation for you. You want that recommendation to be a good one, okay? And we'll talk about that a little bit more in the future. And then also just be respectful of their time, privacy, and research agenda, because remember, they're juggling all kinds of stuff, right? Their whole life doesn't revolve around your research project, okay? All right, so brainstorm by yourself, then do it with your advisor. And then become familiar with the larger context, okay? If your advisor works on some very specific aspect of cell cycle regulation in regards to cancer, you don't need to know the details of the methods that that guy uses in order to do his science or her science, okay? But do know something about cancer, okay? Yeah, know a little bit about, if you're studying earthquakes, know something about earthquakes, right? Before you go talk to them. Try and understand the larger context. And I know it sounds silly, but in a lot of ways, often I have undergraduates who come to work in my lab, and they really know the details of their project, but they don't really see how it fits into the larger body of science, how it really contributes to a larger research discipline, okay? So if you could do that before you go in, way better, okay? Because your mentor can fill in all those little details, right? All right, you might want to prepare a basic bibliography before you start to write up your project, okay? And this, you can talk to your mentor and say, hey, you got a few papers I could read that would help out? But remember, this is in addition to the papers you've already looked up, right? The literature that you've already checked out a little bit, okay? And then you might even choose a specific publication or venue. You've got an idea for your project, right? It's computer science, computer engineering, and you've just come up with some really cool code or something. Know where you're going to publish that. Plan ahead. Where are you going to present the research, and what journal you're going to publish that in. It's a good idea to think about it, okay? And it'll be really impressive to your advisor or your mentor if you're ready to talk about that when you meet with them, okay? And then the next step is to outline your project. And I'm not talking details. I'm talking the back of a napkin at the Burger King, okay? You're like, just a handful of bullet points, right? This is kind of what I want to do. And then the next step is to start taking that outline and turning it into a grant proposal. Okay? Your research proposal. So now you want to outline your proposal in a little bit more detail using a word processor this time. Okay? Make sure it looks like you've sort of thought about it, and then run it over with your mentor. Okay? Go over it with your mentor and say, here's my outline. This is kind of what I'm thinking. What do you think? Okay? They'll rough in some details. But make sure in this first outline that you've got a bang-up title, a title that makes sense, that's going to get somebody's attention, a clean and persuasive introduction. We're talking 2 to 3 sentences at this point, right? And then eventually your proposal is going to go through a whole bunch of drafts. Craft it really carefully, because this is the quality of your proposal is the primary determinant in whether or not you get $1,500. Okay? And I'm going to talk about this in a lot more detail. But prior to submitting it, read it out loud. Have other members of the lab read it. Have your mom read it. Okay? There's reasons for that. Okay. So, now I'm going to talk about nuts and bolts. Some of the mechanics about how to write a convincing proposal. And the first part that's going to get the reviewer's attention is the abstract, the title, the executive summary. Okay? This has to be very succinct. A lot of reviewers that I know, they look at the abstract, and it's like a first impression. If the abstract sucks, the rest of the proposal could be great, but they're not going to get past the abstract. Okay? So if you're going to spend a lot of time crafting sentences, invest your time in the abstract, right? In the summary. Okay? So what I'm going to suggest you do here is write it out like you normally would, and then go back through and reread it, and guaranteed almost every sentence can be broken into 2. Right? And that will make it more succinct. Okay? Do that exercise. It will make it a better abstract. Okay? So here's your strategic approach. Right? Sentence number 1. State the problem. The universal problem. Right? Earthquakes are a big deal. Okay? Cancer could be a large problem. Okay? That's a universal problem. It's stated in terms that everybody's going to understand. Okay? And then the second sentence, now you want to state the problem more specifically, right? The reader knows cancer is a problem. Now you're going to say cell cycle regulation by the p53 gene expression, blah, 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 blah. A little bit more explicit, right? Okay? Slippage along earthquake contact zones, blah, 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 right? A little bit more specific, okay? Second sentence, right? Third sentence and fourth sentence, take a couple to state the approach that you're going to take, okay? I'm going to do X, Y, and Z in order to better understand p53 cell cycle regulation or something like that, right? And then in your fifth sentence, state what are the broader impacts of the successful completion of this. We will be able to accurately predict earthquakes across the globe. Huh, big deal, right? We will be able to treat cancer or prevent cancer. Big deal, right? Detect cancer, right? Understand something more about the cell cycle. Right? Know more about Egyptian literature. Okay? The broad impacts. Okay? That's just in the abstract executive summary goal sort of importance that captures that whole thing in just a handful of sentences. Right? Okay. Now the next step is the main body of your proposal. And we're going to start out with the very first paragraph. Put the problem into context. Now this has to make sense to your mother-in-law, the way you explain it. And I'll tell you why. Because your proposal will be reviewed by other professors in the college in which you reside, okay, of the expertise. Which means that in my college, right, you could be doing molecular biology, but somebody who studies polar bears or somebody who studies plants is going to review your grant proposal, okay? So they are knowledgeable, but they are not experts. Yeah. So the question is, who's going to review our grant proposal? And the answer is faculty members in the college in which your expertise would reside, right? So if you're working in 2 different colleges, then it's going to probably only go to 1, okay? So your grant will not be reviewed by multiple faculty, right? Right, Gene? Probably not.
Whoever's your mentor, whatever college they're aligned with, is the one that
Nah. So if your mentor's in computer science, it's going to go to computer science. If it's in anthropology, it's going to go whatever college anthropology is in, right? Okay, so that's who's going to review it. Yeah? Now, if you mix two departments together, you're going to have to write a very compelling proposal because it's still only going to be reviewed in one of those two departments. And so say what you're doing is you're mixing mixed media video with anthropology, okay? Which is cool, totally cool. But it's only going to be reviewed by the faculty in one of those, and you're only going to have a mentor in one of those two disciplines. So what you need to do is the discipline where your mentor is, you're going to want to beef that up and make it more specific, and the one where your mentor is not is going to be much more general. Okay? I can talk to you afterwards if you still have questions about that. Right? But that's a strategy that I would use. Right? Okay. So this is putting the problem into context, first of all. Right? Cancer is a big deal because blah, blah, blah. Right? Earthquakes and predicting earthquakes is a big deal, X, Y, Z. Okay? Now, the second paragraph now, you want to describe how previous efforts to successfully navigate research in this discipline have been valiant, but they have been failures, okay? And you can point out why they failed. Previous efforts to predict earthquakes have failed because technology didn't exist. The computational power didn't exist. The algorithms didn't exist because nobody approached it from an animal science perspective before, okay? Right? That's why they failed. Now the third paragraph. This is where you come up and present your clever idea, right? So just in general now, not details, but in general, describe the approach and tools that you will use, okay? This novel approach. I'm going to be able to solve this problem because nobody has looked at it from the perspective of a female before, for example. Nobody's looked at it using these new algorithms or using these new tools, right? Okay. This is where you pose your experimental hypotheses, right? So this is where you say the alternative hypothesis is no difference between the treated subjects, and the alternative is that there is a significant difference, right? There's a significant effect based on whatever experiments I'm doing, okay? Now, it's very important that you include your hypotheses here, particularly if you're coming at this from an experimental science perspective, okay? I know some reviewers who they flip through it looking for the hypothesis first, right? Where's the hypothesis? Because if there's no hypothesis in this, yeah, you're not doing science, man. This is something else, okay? Make sure that you're explicit. Use bold font. Pose your hypotheses very clearly, okay? And then emphasize the novelty. Emphasize why these guys failed and why you now can be successful, right? And this is where you want to drop names, right? Einstein struggled with this problem, but he failed. And I've got Einstein's figured out. Einstein never couldn't solve this problem, but I can. Okay? Darwin struggled with this issue, but now I can explain what was going on. Okay? All right? You'll set yourself up to be a genius. Right? Emphasize the novelty. Right? Okay, now, still on the main body of the proposal, but now we're talking about the fourth paragraph. Here's where you're going to describe your experimental approach. Okay? Now, here's where you describe in detail how you're going to solve the problem. Okay? This is methodology. Okay? These are the details of your experimental design. It all goes right here. And I'm going to encourage you to use graphs and figures and images to explain this. Okay? Because remember, an image can convey 1,000 words if done correctly. And you're limited to 2 pages. Okay? And I'll talk more about images in a minute. But what's important here is to emphasize the work that you have already invested in this project. Because remember, the idea is that you will convince the reviewers that this is a good investment, which means you need to convince them that you've already thought a lot about this. Right? You've already gone a long way to solving this problem. Okay? So you want to convince them of that. So this is where if you have preliminary data, use it. If you don't have preliminary data, somebody does, right? Previous work in this lab showed that, X, Y, and Z. Okay? It is anticipated that I will resolve or figure out or sort out, and this is where you want to put preliminary data, or if you don't have your own data, use somebody else, or model some data. Okay? Use some model data. It's anticipated that I would get this frequency distribution of something, and this is what it would look like, okay? You want to emphasize that because this will let the reviewers know that you know how to get the data that you need to answer your question. Okay? Now, the fifth paragraph is the analytical approach. Okay? Don't confuse these two. Okay? The fourth and the fifth paragraph. This is a big problem that I see with a lot of ORCA grant proposals that I read. The students are all amped up about their research project and how they're going to collect their data, but they do a very poor job of explaining how they're going to make sense of all their data. You know what I'm saying? Okay? So what you want to do is convince the reviewers that not only can you generate data, but you can synthesize it and make sense out of it. You know how to analyze the data that you'll be collecting. Okay? Yeah? Yeah. Okay, so the question is, what if all of the data you're working with is really metadata, right? Data that's already been gathered, but you're working with it in a new or novel way. Okay? So what you will do is in the experimental approach, talk about how you're going to mine your data and where your data will come from. And then in the analytical approach, now you're going to talk about how you're going to take that data and do something new with it. Okay? And if it's already data that's been collected, then you've got a lot of freedom to do both of these, right? Yeah. That's exactly right. So right here is this is where you say, I'm going to take the data that I collected, I'm going to analyze it using an analysis of variance, for example, or something like that. And what would be really cool is if you had some model data to show I anticipate it to look like this. Okay? Yeah. Or previous work in the lab showed results that sort of looked like this, right? Because remember, what you're trying to convince them of is that you know how to analyze the data. You're thinking about it. You've thought about it. And you're doing it the right way, okay? Taking the right approach. All right, so now throughout the entire proposal, make sure that you cite the literature appropriately, okay? So there may be some blanket statements like, it is well known that you cannot extract 3 grams of neurons or brain tissue from an earthworm. Well, maybe not everybody really knows that, so you're going to have to cite some of those statements, right? You got to look it up. You can't make it up. Now, your advisor can help you with that because you're not used to using citation support as much as your advisor is probably, okay? But you need to cite the literature appropriate, okay? Use headings and emphasize style appropriately. Now, there's a template that you can download from the ORCA office, right? A Microsoft Word template that's already formatted for the correct font size. It's got the correct headings that they're looking for and that sort of stuff. But don't feel constrained to not use more of your own formatting options in order to emphasize the points that you want to make, right? Like, use boldface font when you're talking about your hypotheses, okay? Underline important content, right? Or use all caps or whatever. But feel free to use the formatting styles that you want to use so that it conveys the ideas that you want to be conveyed, right? Now, use figures appropriately. You don't get extra space or pages for your figures. You have to fit your figures into this 2-page requirement, right? But like I said, if it's appropriate, a figure can say a lot, right? If I see a figure of model data or analyzed data or projected data or preliminary data, that tells me, whoa, this student has already collected data, has already analyzed data, has already thought about it, and that takes up this much space on the page, okay? Just make sure that when you use a figure, that you have a concise figure legend that contains all the information necessary for the reader to understand what you're trying to say with that figure. All right? Don't make the reviewer go digging through the proposal trying to find out what this figure is all about. Okay? So make sure that there's a figure legend right underneath the figure. Okay? Convince the reviewer that you've already worked on it and that there's a high probability of success. Have that in the back of your mind the whole time you're writing your grant proposal. Now, there's another section that's part of the grant proposal called the anticipated academic outcome. This is where you write that the anticipated academic outcome is a publication. Okay? Remember, your science does, your research doesn't exist until you've published it. So you should tell them, I will publish this research in the Journal of Quaternary Reports. Okay? And I'm going to present my research to my mentor's peers at the annual Society of Nematologists meetings in Kauai, Hawaii. Okay? Write it down. Be specific. May 22nd, 2013. Right? And then there's another section where you talk about your qualifications. This is your chance to say, I've worked in this lab previously. I've taken these courses that prepared me for this particular project. Okay? Add that stuff. But there's other stuff there as well. Okay? There's work experience that you had, or travel abroad experience that you had, or something relevant to where you used to live, right? There are other things outside of typical academia that probably prepared you in some way or another to successfully complete your research. Don't be afraid to put that stuff in there, okay? But again, convince the reviewer that this is a slam dunk project, okay? There's a section in there where you can talk about a project timeline. This is important because the reviewer can look at what you propose to do, and in the back of your reviewer's mind, they're like, is this feasible? Can they really do this in 1 year? Or is this a 6-year PhD project, right? So your project timeline lets you show the reviewer that you know that you can do this stuff in the right amount of time. So this is just a few sentences to describe what you're going to do and what the major milestones are that you're going to try and meet, okay? So you're going to say so your proposal gets funded in like January, right? Check rolls in, project starts in January. So your timeline will say, from January to February, I will be in Madagascar collecting hissing cockroaches, right? And then from March to April, I will be extracting DNA and sequencing this suite of genes. And then from June through August, I will be assembling genomes. And then in August, I'm going to write this paper up. August to October, I'll write this paper up and have a draft ready to submit to the Journal of Cockroach Studies. Yeah? So, great question. The question is, what about work that we've already completed? Do we put that in the timeline? And the answer is no. So what you do is you say, when you're writing your proposal, you say the current status of this work, right? Previous work in the lab, we have already established that we've already got the DNA samples in hand, right? We've already got the Dead Sea Scrolls translated, right? Or something like that, right? And so starting in January, we're going to start doing X, Y, and Z, okay? The next section in your grant proposal is the fit with the BYU mission. So what I'm going to encourage you to do is read over the aims of a BYU education, right? And what our institutional objectives are. And then from there, you write why what you're doing is a good fit for what BYU hopes you get out of BYU. And I will challenge you to come up with some way that it's not. Think about it. Oh, I'm just curing cancer. How does that not make BYU look great? Right? And think about it. As scholars, you generate knowledge. As scholars, you make the world a better place for other people. Dude, how does that not fit? Right? But all of you should get like full credit on this one. But think about it. Think about what's unique about your project and how it fits with your opportunities to grow here at BYU and to elevate others. Okay? And then lastly, there's the bottom section of your grant proposal where you're going to put your sources. Okay? So you want to be thorough. If you cite it in the grant proposal, make sure that you cite it in the literature cited section, your sources section. Okay? I'm not sure I understand your... No footnotes. I'm going to encourage you not to use footnotes at all. Use in-text citation. Okay. So it said Bob Jones says you can't pull out 3 meters of myelin from an earthworm and then just cite it. Jones et al. 1997. And then in the cited sources section, just list the publication. Okay? That's included in the 2 pages. You don't get extra space for that. Now, you can only use up to 6 sources anyway, okay? So it's not like a ton. Be judicious about what you cite. But in 2 pages, you shouldn't be citing like 30 sources anyway, okay? Right? But you want to be consistent. Use the same citation format throughout, okay? Be consistent. All right, you can only use 6 sources, right? So, I'm going to give you some critical tech tips now. I'm going to go through the submission process, okay? So, what I'm going to encourage you to do is use a word processor and type everything out exactly the way you like it to be and submit it as a PDF, okay? Because if you submit it as a Word document and somebody else is using some other version of Word, sometimes it jacks up your pagination, your figures migrate throughout the text. Don't be that guy, okay? Make a PDF of it so that it looks perfect, the exact way you want the reviewer to see it, and submit a PDF document of your grant proposal, okay? There are a few other sections of the application which don't go on that 2-page grant proposal. I'm going to encourage you to type those up and get them dialed in as well, and I'll show you where they go in the application process, right? But, so one thing is that you've got why your mentor is a good fit. You get 100 words for that. And the other one is an abstract where you get 100 words, okay? These 2 parts are separate from the proper grant proposal itself, okay? What I'm going to suggest is that for the abstract, copy and paste the language from that goal, purpose, project importance section of your proposal, and then trim it down to 100 words, okay? That's what's going to go in that box. And then the why mentor is a good fit, you only get 100 words for that. I'm going to talk about both of those in just a minute. But there's also a section here where you have to check your responses to IRB approval for human subjects, for example. Right? If you're studying the effects of, you know, homemade chocolate chip cookies on your roommate's homework or whatever, that utilizes human subjects, right? You're studying human responses, okay? And so you have to have the institutional review board approval to do that. Now, it doesn't mean that you have to get IRB approval before you write your grant proposal. You can write your grant proposal and then you just check this box that says, I will get IRB approval before I feed phosphorus 32 to my roommates, okay? Right. You also have to get IACUC approval. So if you're working with fish or lizards or things like that, then you need to get IACUC approval. If you're working with recombinant DNA or something that's radioactive or flammable or anthrax, some biowarfare agent, yes? Okay, good question. So the question was, what if I'm conducting interviews? Well, if you're interviewing humans, then you probably still need to get IRB approval for that, okay? But you won't know until you actually apply for it. And Gene, there's a...
There's a workshop on October 17th to 18th at 11 or 3 p.m. Go to the ORCA website, and those who are going to do any kind of human interaction, if you get clarity that might shape your proposal and allow you to sail through that review.
Thanks, Gene. So you all get that? So if you're working with human subjects, strongly encourage you to go to that IRB workshop, because there you'll learn what sorts of hoops you need to jump through to work with human subjects. Better, you might even learn that you don't need IRB approval for that particular type of project. Yeah?
What were the dates again?
The dates again, Gene, were October 17th.
Wednesday and Thursday.
Yep. 11 or 3, and it's on the ORCA website. You can go to the ORCA website and get that as well. All right? But I just want to re-emphasize that this is important, because if I'm a reviewer and I'm reading through it and I see that you're working with weaponized anthrax, but you didn't check off the box that said biowarfare agents, I'm going to suspect that you don't know what you're doing. Okay? So make sure that you're careful when it comes time to check those boxes off. Right? So this is what the application looks like. When you go to submit your proposal, well, I'm going to go through all the steps, okay? First, you're going to go to orca.byu.edu. You're going to scroll down the little ORCA pull-down menu to apply for a grant, and this is going to come up. You're going to log in, just like with your Route Y ID, and then you're going to see something like this. The submission deadline is 1 month, 5 days, 10 hours, 1 minute, 20 seconds, like that. Counting you down, right? You log in, you know exactly when that proposal is due, okay? And then there are 2 steps here. The first step is your student profile, and the second step is completing your project profile. The first step looks like this. It's just like you get an account at Amazon.com or something, right? So you're just putting your name, your address, your ID numbers, contact information, addresses, phone numbers, that kind of stuff. And then down at the bottom, your year in school, when you plan to graduate, major, college, your GPA, that sort of jazz, right? It's important here that if you did receive an ORCA grant, that you check yes. It's also important that where it says, did you submit your final report, you say yes. Because if you say no, then you're probably not going to be eligible for another grant until you submit your final report on the previous one. Okay? Okay, so once you finish that out, you finish that, you go to you close that page, and you got a little green check mark. All right, you've completed your student profile. Now you're ready to submit your grant proposal. So you click on this button right here, and that takes you to a page that looks like this. This is where you type in the title of your project, your abstract, and your relevant coursework. Okay? This is those sections where I'm going to encourage you to type them up on a separate document, get them worded exactly, use the spell checker, right? That sort of stuff, and then copy and paste that text into these response boxes. Okay? All right, and so this is where you got your IRB and your hazardous substance and all that kind of stuff. And then down here at the bottom, you have to list countries where you're going to travel in order to do your project, and I'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. And then if you have co-researchers, right, so if 2 of you are doing a team project, this is where you put your co-researchers on there, 2 or 3 of you that are doing a group project. Just understand that if you do a group project, you have to divide the $1,500 by N being the number of co-researchers you have on your project. No, only if they're another BYU student, okay? But I think what you really want to do when you write that grant proposal, emphasize your role in the project and de-emphasize theirs. So what you want to do is say, this guy at Colorado State University will provide us with the material, and they're going to do the magnetic resonance imaging or whatever, and then you spend the majority of your time talking about what you are going to do here. Right? Yeah? Great question. So science is collaborative, right? Research is collaborative. So we're all working with other people. So when you write your grant proposal, you want to be explicit about what your role in this project will be. You want to carve out your contribution. And this proposal will be all about your contribution to this bigger hub, right? This bigger wheel, right? It's important that you put your particular contribution into context, but that it's all you. Yeah? There was another question, I thought. Yeah?
I had the same question. That's where it was.
Oh, okay. Cool. All right, so now there's some information that you provide about your mentor, right? What their name is, what department and college they're all in, and all that kind of jazz. And then right here, you're going to talk about how your research interests are a good fit with your mentors, okay? This is an important part of the application, right? If you're really interested in the history of trombone playing and your advisor is a molecular biologist, maybe not the best fit, right? So this is where you spell out, hey, all my life, all I've wanted to do was write code and be involved in encryption, and my advisor is like the world's leading authority in encryption. Perfect fit, right? So you want to emphasize what a good fit your research ideas are with your mentor, okay? And then right down here, this is where you upload your project profile. So you click that button right there, and you upload your PDF file of your completed grant proposal, okay? And then that goes to the ORCA office, right? So once you have done that, you'll see a page that looks like this that says green light, green light, green light, you're done, okay? And you want to get all of that stuff done before that clock ticks down to almost nothing, right? So my recommendation to you is to get that stuff done. Don't put it off until the last few minutes because, I don't know, 300 other students are doing it the last few minutes, and they're going to cork up the server, and yours won't get in until 12:01 on November the 2nd or whatever. And sorry, dude. There's like no mercy. Even at the Lord's University, no mercy. Okay? So my recommendation is work really hard on it. Know that the deadline's coming up. Get it submitted at least a couple hours before midnight, okay? And then have it done. And once you push the button, you go to J-Dogs, get a dog, throw back a cold one, right? And just relax, knowing that you did your best, right? Don't put it off until a minute before and like, oh, I forgot that. And then all that hard work's for nothing. You don't want to be that guy, okay? All right, so there are some criteria by which your proposal will be evaluated. It's based on you, right? How willing is your mentor to work with you? Does your mentor really want to work with you? That'll come out in the letter that they write, okay? Do you show some initiative? Are you prepared academically? Were you successful on past grants, okay? They're going to look at that stuff. They're going to look at your mentor, right? Is this guy some kind of joker, right? Does he know what he's doing? Does he have expertise in the subject in which you're interested in, right? They're going to look at that kind of stuff, okay? They're going to look at the proposal itself, and they're going to say, is it well developed and articulated, okay? Are the objectives clearly stated, right? Do I understand what's going on, even though I'm not an expert in the field, okay? They're going to look at the hypotheses or the creative focus, and they're going to say, does this have merit? Is this really a big deal? Or is this somebody just going through the motion, collecting stamps or data or something and not making anything bigger or brighter out of it? Okay? Is this a great idea? They're going to look at that. Okay? They're going to look at the methodology. And they're going to say, is this methodology appropriate for the outcome that you're hoping to achieve? And they're going to say, what's your potential? Remember, how well did you do at convincing them that you're a good investment, that this project is a good investment? Okay? How strong is the mentoring relationship? This is going to come through both through your project, and it's also going to come through in your mentor's endorsement of the project when they write this letter. There are two ways this could go, right? That mentor's letter could say, yeah, I remember this kid. He came through my office a couple times. It was kind of a drag. I was working on something else and wanted to know something about trombones or something, right? You could get a letter that looks like that. Or you could get the letter that says, oh, yeah, this student has been working on this project for a while now. They're really bright. They understand what the project is. They've got their head wrapped around the methodology. They've thought a lot about this. They've invested a lot in it already, right? The reviewer reads that letter of endorsement. They're like, yeah, good investment, right? The mentor is already invested in this project, has already invested in this student, okay? That's the letter that you want to get. All right, so some tips. Complete your project and then submit a final report. If you don't submit your final report, Gene's going to have those goons from the ORCA office hunt you down. And they're going to extract $1,500 from you. Not really, right, Gene? Don't do that. But you have to pay it back if you don't write your final report. So make sure that you write your final report, all right? And if you do travel someplace else, your travel has to be arranged through the Kennedy Center, all right? So you can't just buy a ticket to Mexico and go down there and hang out for 6 months. You have to coordinate all of your international travel through the Kennedy Center, right? And remember, the submission deadline is November 1 before midnight. And like I said, don't push it, man. Get it done so you can, like, relax, okay? Your final report deadline is December 2013, okay? And you have to have that report submitted before you can be eligible for another ORCA award, right? All right, so why do this much work in the middle of the semester? Because it's killer. It is a lot of work. Why bother doing this? Well, you can talk to some of my former students who did some of this work. They wrote ORCA grants. They got them funded. They did some awesome science. And then they went and presented that science to my peers in Hawaii. Nice place. Got in some killer surfing while we were there. And you also win cash. Dude, you're getting $1,500 for this. Okay? Plus, the opportunities that this will open up to you are amazing. Right? I could go through just each one of these students and tell you where they're at right now. And in every case, the research that they did that was supported by their ORCA grant proposals launched them on their career path. Okay? Here are your peers at the other institutions, and you got an ORCA grant and did research. This is you now. Okay? All that stuff that they have to figure out in graduate school, you figured out as an undergraduate. Okay? And their resume that's like this, yours is now like this. Do you understand that? I'm looking at graduate students who want to work in my lab, and I get all these applications. And I see some that say, I think I'd really be excited to do research on this. And they get another one that says, I've done research on this and published these papers. Like, dude, slam dunk, right? No difference. And that's the type of resume that you will generate, right? That's what this can do for you. And that, all other things aside, that is why I'm such a champion for this program, this ORCA program, because I have seen what otherwise would have been an average or mediocre student who struggled. Right? BYU, come on, man. GPA's hard, grinding. It's hard, right? But this, if you take advantage of it, can set you apart from your careers big time. Okay? Take advantage of that, right? You guys are my students. We went to really cool places, but ultimately, right, this was a tremendous leverage for them, and it launched their careers. It made my students rich and famous, right? Kind of, right?